one more episode with our conversation about soccer. I have been trying to talk to people all over the place, all over the world, from India, Middle East, Africa, South America, United States, UK. So a lot of places, and I'm very happy. I appreciate the opportunity today to have our Mr. Geraldo Delamore. It's a Brazilian coach with many, many years of experience. And coach, I really appreciate the opportunity to have you here, to listen to you, learn from you, learn from your background. It's many, many years of experience inside Brazil, outside Brazil, Middle East, Australia. So it's a lot of background behind your career. And thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself, please, a little bit for us. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much, Igor, for the invitation. As you said, my name is Geraldo Delamore, from Brazil, from Minas Gerais, southeast of Brazil, but now live in the south, in Caxias do Sul. I've been a coach for more than 30 years within the professional context for more than 25 years. As you mentioned yourself, I had the opportunity to work in Australia for 4 years as a technical advisor to the Australian Futsal Federation. And when I came back to Brazil in 1997, 1998, I moved to professional football, first as a fitness coach, and then I went up to take other position as an assistant coach and also head coach from some clubs in Brazil. And basically, just to point out something very specific that I think it's important, I had worked with Mr. Tite, who was the Brazilian national coach for the last 2 World Cup for around 12 years. And from that period, I spent around 3 to 4 years within Corinthians Paulista, and the time that we won the Libertadores Cup in 2012, and later on, late in December 2012, we won the FIFA World Club Cup, and when we played Chelsea for the final, and that was the last time a South American club won a FIFA Club World Cup. And apart from that, our experiences in Brazil, in Grêmio, Atlético Mineiro, Cruzeiro, abroad in Middle East, as you mentioned, in United Emirates with Al Ain and Al Wahda. So that's all about my career so far.
Okay, coach. Okay, perfect. Very, very good to hear that, Brazilian coach and traveling so many countries, so many places. And I think that's what soccer is about, football is about, It's a global sport, and you can work here and there. You can work in Brazil, Africa, Asia, whatever. It's really a global sport with global opportunities. I would like to start with you talking about a little bit the next generation in Brazil. Many people now, the World Cup is around the corner. Many people now have been talking about the next generation of players in Brazil that doesn't produce the high-level players like used to do. People say it's yes, people say no, some agree, some disagree. So I would like to know, with your background, your experience, what is your opinion about the moment you are now in Brazil with these players that, they have been playing for the national team? What's your opinion about it, please?
Well, there's usually this kind of controversial subject when it comes to the formation of players. I believe that this moment in particular, we have some difficulty with our right and left backs. Brazil has been always well known all over the country, all over the world regarding players in different positions, and we had right and left backs like Casfu, Roberto Carlos, Carlos Alberto Torres, and so many others, Junior, Leandro, so many others in that particular position. And now we have a sort of shortage in that particular position. But apart from that, I think we still have very, very good players playing all over the world. We have great goalkeepers like Alisson playing in Liverpool. We have Ederson now that left Manchester City. We have Gabriel Magalhães, that's now a fullback that's playing in the final of the Champions League. We have Brenner at Juventus. We have Bruno Guimarães at Newcastle. We have Casemiro at Manchester City. We have Gabriel Martinelli at Arsenal. We have now Marquinhos and Beraldo playing for PSG in the final of the European Champions League. We still have up front Vini Jr., we have Endrick playing well for Lyon, we have Rafinha that's doing a marvelous job playing for Barcelona, we have Rodrigo that unfortunately is injured, we have Esteban who is injured as well. Even though we are not having that impact as we used to have in the past, we still are producing very, very good quality players. I think that's that kind of cycle that we have a kind of drop, but we are quite prepared to bounce back because in our cantera, as we say in Spanish, in our grassroots level, we still have many, many players coming from that in different clubs around the country. So we're still very strong in that formation, and I believe that in the near future, the impact is going to be a little bit perhaps stronger than it's now. But I still believe that we can deliver the goods in the World Cup.
Okay, understand. Thank you, Coach. I agree with your opinion. You know, it's a kind of situation that sometimes, I don't know, but maybe sometimes the press, the media, you know, people want something controversial. People want something to sell news. Like we sometimes say, people need to news, say bad stuff, and say we are not ready, we don't have good players anymore, and you know, just to try to get something to improve maybe the news. And so that question leads me to our next topic, and we have in Brazil right now a conversation about number of foreign players in our national league. Some people think that because you have so many foreign players, we are closing the doors for the new players. You know, let's say a 19 years old, 18 years old new player in a let's say first league, but a big club hires or not hires, sign with a new player for 20 million, and then this guy's gonna close the door for the new player. So if it's a kind of, let's try to say we are trying to get a balance. You know, every club needs to sign new players, experienced players, but at the same time you have your under 18, under 20 with new players coming. So I think at some point people have to reach a balance, strike the right balance between who are you going to sign, but who do you have in your academy. So how do you see this situation in Brazil that, you know, especially the first league clubs, they are in a very good shape in terms of financial power. You know, you have some clubs in Brazil with more than 1 billion reais in revenue, but at the same time they have 18, 19 years old new players coming, looking for some gap, some space, some opportunity. So how do you see this balance between financial power to hire or to sign new players and the new youth development players coming?
This question, Igor, is linked to the previous one. And regarding to the previous one, just to finish, we got to remember that there is always a lot of expectation about Brazilian football. And when the impact is not that high, people tend to be a little bit more perhaps concerned or perhaps disappointed. But we got to take into account that the expectation on top of the Brazilian national team is always huge. Regarding to that question, it's something that very new for us. In 2011, I was doing my international license course in England, in London, and I remember at that time that one of our teacher, he mentioned that the Premier League was a kind of, they were the players in the English players, they were going through a difficult situation like we have now in Brazil, because the Premier League was a kind of league that signed many players from abroad, and they didn't have much space for the youngest to come through the process and to make the first team. This is kind of pretty new for us. And what happened is, because you said yourself, some of our clubs now, they are in a situation that when it comes to money, they are in a comfortable position to sign players from different places. And because the market in South America became accessible to the Brazilian clubs, sometimes it's a kind of more affordable for the clubs to sign a player that comes from the other South American countries than perhaps to sign a youngest, because you know that when they turn 16, according to the Brazilian law, they are already in condition to sign their first professional contract. And because you have to sign a contract at least for 5 years, sometimes this contract becomes a little bit more expensive than to sign a player that comes from another South American country. This is the kind of situation that we are facing right now. In fact, yesterday or last night, we were talking on another live about that particular problem. And there is something new as well now, as when it comes to the calendar. We are now having some regional competitions like the Southeast tournament or Central East tournaments that play teams from perhaps Minas Gerais, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Rio Grande do Sul, Paraná, and Santa Catarina. They play a different tournament alongside the Brazilian championship, and it's giving some young players the opportunity to play in these tournaments, because you play Libertadores Cup, you play Brazil Cup, you play South American Cup for teams that make the top 12 in the previous championship. So there are so many competitions that some teams, they prefer to play these regional competitions with the youngest. So even though the first team have been signing many players from other South American countries, some of the youngest, they are having the opportunity to play these small tournaments. Somehow they are being able to show themselves, and perhaps in a condition to fight for a better position within the first teams within their own clubs. But coaches like Dorival Júnior and other important coaches in Brazil, they have been having a word about that situation in such a way that we can protect and we can clear the pathway for the development of our players, and they can make the top teams in Brazil. Otherwise, we will start losing them, they lose ambition. The overall perspective will be negative if we don't come into a conclusion where that balance, as you said, is healthy for everybody.
Okay, I understand. I think these questions is very, very important, and I think the discussion should go deeper than that, because if you look here in the United States, there's a institution here called CDC, CDC is in charge, is responsible for a lot of things in terms of health, in terms of mental health, in terms of medication. By my understanding, anything connected to your health goes to CDC here in the United States. So if you take CDC data here, the numbers, what happened is I check, I don't want to say the word, but when people give up to live, you know what I mean? People don't want to live anymore. They want to give up to live. So if you check the numbers, after 16, 17 years old until 23 years old, this window, the number of people here in the United States that give up to live increase 1,100%. So if you look at the numbers here, it's incredible that only this window from 16 to 23, only this specific window, you have this jump for about 1,100%. So by coincidence, that's the age that we have players trying to cross that barrier to become a professional or to become some kind of really a professional with some kind of income, not just being a professional, but where we're gonna play in a first league club, in a second, third league club. So I believe that it's a big problem. I don't know in Brazil because it's difficult to find data, to find numbers, to have an idea. But I believe, that the problem in terms of the new players coming in this window, 16 to 23 in Brazil, is much, much deeper and much worse than we think. Because actually, 230 million people, we don't have enough numbers to see what's going on with these guys. And I think it's very important. Unfortunately, we cannot find enough data to have a better conclusion. You know what I mean? Like, what really happened, because especially nowadays, people are not ready to deal with frustrations. It's once you deal with frustration, we know that the brain our brain, especially here, the prefrontal cortex, finish at the age of 27 or so. So you have a 17, 18, 19 years old player, something goes wrong, the first option is going to be more emotional because his brain is not ready. He's going to just give up to play soccer and go to a different profession. And I think, how you say in Brazil, the hole is much deeper, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, we don't have enough data to talk about it. So
yesterday, it's quite interesting you mentioned that. Last night we were talking about grassroots levels. We're talking about formation of players, and Professor Medina, who is a very strong character here in Brazil, strong background, has his own business we call Universidade de Futebol, Football University. So is someone that's been dealing with football for many, many years. And he mentioned something very important. How can I put it? Above everything else, we gotta be sure that we are preparing human beings, women and men, not only players, because at the end of the day, the bottleneck doesn't allow everybody to make to the first team, and the career pathway within football, we know that to get that is very hard, and perhaps 5% or 10% of players that play grassroots level will be able to make the top team. The others will fall short. And we gotta make sure that we lead them in such a way that if they can't make it, they are quite good enough to look for other options in their lives apart from football. So when you mention about frustration, it's something very important for this new generation. We know that the youngest at this new generation, they don't cope very well with frustration. They don't cope with very well with a no answer, for example, and not achieving something might be something that really hurt them. But as educators, as coaches, as educators, we got to make sure that we show them that football is not the only path, because talent is important, and we know that not all of them, in fact, a very few percentage will be able to make to the professional. But you can have football in university, you might be able to get a scholarship. We have many players from Brazil here that are not able to make the top of the teams here, but they have been able, according to their talents, to apply for a scholarship, for example, in the United States. So perhaps they are not good enough to make the top of the football at the highest level, but they are able to play second division, third division, university. And even if football is not the future, might be able to play as a leisure, in leisure time, and be able to carry their life in such a way they fulfill their ambition in other fields of their lives. I think that's the main thing, and this is where our responsibility lies when it comes to coaching, when it comes to leading youngsters, and when it comes to deal with the youth. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, coach, you said something very important. Like, my opinion, the professional clubs, they have a youth sport director or a youth coordinator or something like this in the academy. I think this guy also, besides his job to create a link between youth development and professional, I think this guy should be, ready to help those that will fail at some point in the process, and help them in mental terms, help them with the professionals inside the club, psychologists, all these things, because unfortunately many stay away or stay out of the process. That's really important. Thank you, coach. Thank you for your words. Let's jump to the next one. Is to talk about the players. Another issue in Brazil and maybe in Europe, I don't know, but in Brazil for sure. Maybe in Argentina because of Maradona, Messi now, Riquelme, many players we call the authentic number 10, the authentic midfielder, the classic midfielder, the brain of the team, the guy that sees ahead, the guy that sees further. What's your opinion when people say, oh, Brazil doesn't produce the number 10 anymore, like Zico, like, many others? How do you see this when people say that about the Brazilian new players?
Well, this is something that we last night we were talking about this as well. South America in particular, this is a very typical South American player. In Europe, you might remember Roberto Baggio, you might remember Del Piero, you might remember Michel Platini, David Bergkamp from the Dutch team, but few exceptions in Europe. In South America, we had plenty. You mentioned Riquelme, you mentioned Messi, Maradona, Recoba. In Brazil, we have Neto, Zico, Dicá, Zenon, Pelé, Rivelino. And this is something that it's quite, we may be able to point very straight one of the reasons that we are not producing that player anymore. And it comes to the reason that we are importing concepts and sometimes methodology that does not suit our development as used to be, as we had in the past. What I mean is, because we turn our vision to what they are creating and building in Europe, and we decided that at some point that what we had here should go through a kind of turnaround, that we somehow forgot our roots, if I can say that. So, and it comes basically to systems, playing systems. Play a 4-4-2 was very common in Europe. In Brazil, we used to play a 4-4-2, but with a diamond in midfield, or perhaps even a square, 2 defensive midfielders and 2 offensive midfielders and 3 strikers. And when you have that kind of system, that kind of team layout, you have to have players that can play between lines, and basically they can play giving their backs to the opponent's goal. As we had with our famous number 10, the player that plays it, basically what he did, what they used to do at that time was to organize the match, organize the team, dictate the pace of the game, assist the strikers, assist the wingers. And we don't have this player anymore, because we start to pick our best players and try to play them wide. We took them out of the middle of the game, out of the middle of the pitch, and play them wide. Like we have Mini Junior, we have Rafinha, we have Gabriel Martinelli, you have Estevão. So when you think our best players now, apart from Neymar that's still playing, and he can play that number 10, is the only one here in Brazil. We have Memphis Depay from Holland that play in Corinthians, and we have Garro that plays in Corinthians, that's also number 10. We have Arrascaeta, who is a Uruguayan that plays in Flamengo. These are typical number 10. But in Brazil, our number 10 classic, we have Neymar, we have Alan Patrick, but he's getting a little bit older, playing in Internacional, it's also Brazil, and we have Matheus Pereira in Cruzeiro, but in the past we had plenty. And this is the result, that we got our best talent players and we decide to play them wide. And it comes back to bring some concepts from abroad and not respecting our own identity. So what I can say to you is that we have been thinking a lot of how we can rescue, or how can we strengthen and get back our football identity, because we've been importing concepts, training methodology, regardless our own style of football. And I think this is the reason why we are not producing that number 10 anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, there are some opinions here that people say you can create 2 kinds of players: thinkers and doers. Those who think, those who do something. And some people say that coaches, we have to try give the players the game. Some people say that the game doesn't belong to the players anymore. Some people say that it's too much, it's a little bit too much, like do this, do that, move here, move there, move this way. A lot of situations that they don't think, they just do what we tell you to do. And maybe, my opinion, when you deal with 11, 12, 13, 14 years old players, and you have coaches telling the kids all the time what to do this, do that, move this way, move that way. They stop to perceive, they stop to evaluate, they stop to reason, they stop to judge, they stop to make decisions and focus on do what I tell you to be done. You know what I mean? Like, I think maybe it's a little bit too much orders, too much instructions, and they don't have the freedom to just play the game. Like, if you have players with the different brain, like Ganso, nowadays is like Neymar, like other players that they have a different brain, they have a different view, and you tell this guy all the time what to do, I think you don't help. You know what I mean? I think these special players, we don't help them to tell them all the time what to do, and then maybe it's one reason that in the youth development we are a kind of blocking or impairing or damaging the formation, and that's probably
I
so.
know what you mean, and if I can say to you that this is another thing that we were talking last night, and I remember a good friend of mine, his name is Alex Costa. He used to play for the Portuguese national team as a right back. We were in a course together, and he said something very important, that the game belongs to the players. And as a coach, you gotta know until what extent you can influence the game. You gotta know your responsibility as far as how to develop the players to make sure that he or she can make their own decisions in the game. Sometimes, and it's another reality that we face here in Brazil, and we are struggling to turn this around as well, is the battle between result and development. Because sometimes the pressure to produce results in the game, like the scoreboard, sometimes sometimes it jeopardizes the health development of players. At that stage, 13, 12, 11, 14, they gotta experience different positions on the field, on the pitch. They gotta deal with different pitch size. They gotta be out there to enjoy themselves, to enjoy the game, and through enjoy the game, develop their skills. It's quite funny because I was just listening to an interview of Luis Enrique from PSG a couple of minutes ago. And he said that he is in a stage now that he believes that he has no control about his team. And he said that he feels very comfortable about that, because when he knows that he's there and he knows that the team has his own agenda on the pitch, and it's good because his team becomes more unpredictable and it's hard for the opponents to catch up. So it means that he got into a stage now that he's on the bench and he's enjoying the game, and he's enjoying what his team is doing, performing on the pitch. And at that level, and we got to bring it down, at that level of pressure, at that level of money, at that level of stars, you got to bring it down to the youth level to say that don't constrain the development of your players by putting them under so much pressure that they can enjoy the game, they can't express themselves.
Yeah, coach, you said something very interesting, and made me think like, I think the biggest challenge nowadays for the Brazilian academies, for the youth development in Brazil, the big clubs that used to produce a lot of players, Fluminense, Rio de Janeiro, Grêmio, where I used to work, Flamengo. I think the biggest challenge for the guy in charge of the coach, the youth coaches, is figure out a way to tangible the job of the coach. I mean, like, how as a youth coordinator or a youth sport director or a youth director, how can I evaluate my coach without take a look at the score of the game? You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest challenge. How make this job tangible? How make sure I know, or how make sure we can evaluate the coach's job without the outcome of the game, without the score. I think that's the biggest challenge, because once the coach knows that people are going to ask, how was the score? Like, if Grêmio plays International under 15, as a coach, what is my job? I'm focused on produce good players. I'm focused on youth development, or I'm focused on win the game and keep my job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think we have here in Brazil a very good example of a club that's doing it very, very well. That's Palmeiras. Palmeiras have been producing very, very good players and have been able to bring those players up to the first team, like we mentioned about Hendrick, Estevam. Now they have Alan, they have Luigi. And it's a very, very good model here in Brazil nowadays, the way Palmeiras has been developing the youth teams and the way they are producing players for the first team. I think that's something that now comes back to balance as well, because when you wear a jersey as heavy as the jersey from Grêmio International, you also can allow yourself to be in a position that you've been beaten or flogged every single time, because you know that that jersey carries a weight that you have responsibility about this as well. However, if the club has a very strong mentality and has a philosophy, and it goes back to draw the line and to establish guidelines that we have to produce such a number of players per season that be able to achieve the first team. Another very good example in Brazil is Clube Atlético Paranaense, that has a very strong mentality when it comes to formation of players. So you gotta put yourself in a position where you are able to deliver the goods on the pitch when it comes to results, but you are able also to perhaps to not to be so disturbed about a loss that may impact a championship, but you know that those players that you are preparing, they will be able to be in the first team down the line. If you have a look at what Barcelona does with its youth teams, so you have Gavi play, you have Lamine Yamal, you have Pedri, you have other young players coming to the first team and playing Champions League, UEFA Champions League, and most of them coming from the youth team. This is a very, very good model for us to follow. But I'm sure to you that the youth teams, they are also producing the goods when it comes to results. So that balance is important, but it gotta come from the top. It can't be only the director of youth. It gotta come from the top. And when I say about the top, it comes from the who is in charge and who is around of who is in charge to develop and to structure that kind of mentality that comes top down, and make sure that keep doing the job. Results are important. If you lose one here and one there, that's normal. But the important thing is that our player has a kind of pathway that we are sure that they will make the top team, or perhaps quite good number of them will be able to make the first team. That has to have every club should have a document, should have a paper, should have a philosophy to draw those guidelines to make sure that they don't step away. And because, in Brazil, we have that kind of associative clubs. You have a lot of politics, and sometimes you change the presidents and you change the whole politics, the whole policy when it comes to development of players. So if you don't draw a document, if you don't put this on paper and make sure that if you change the top, the structure is still there, we're going to still struggle to make sure that this works.
Yeah, makes sense. Once you change the direction of the club, but the concept stay in the club, even if you change the direction. All right. Exactly. Thank you, Coach. Let's talk about, I saw in your resume you have experience also with futsal. I believe in Brazil, I don't know now, but, for many, many years, futsal used to do a wonderful job in Brazil. Futsal used to be a wonderful tool in terms of help to produce, especially for the UA, U10, U12, in terms of quick thinking, all the confrontation you have no time, no space. What's your opinion about futsal, especially for this age group, UA, U10, U12?
Well, as you mentioned, I work with futsal for many years. I've been an assistant coach at the Brazilian national team for 3 years, from 1989 to 92. We won a South American Championship, a Pan American Championship, and from that, I went to Australia to work 4 years for the Australian Futsal Federation. It's a very good point you mentioned, because futsal helps a lot for the players to develop that close skills, to that finesse on the ball, very good ball control. And not only futsal, I'll come back to futsal, but what happened in Brazil, not only futsal, but we have also beach soccer. We also have players playing in informal games, in the dust. It's curious that in Palmeiras, for example, they have now a different kind of pitch that's not very, they allow the players to play barefoot to make sure that they can develop that sort of finesse, that sort of very good ball control, close skills. I believe that futsal can do a lot for the development of youth players. I still believe on that, but it's important that it gotta come into a point that they gotta move to the big picture, because there are some aspects of the game, of the outdoor game, that you are not be able to develop within futsal. That means the long ball, the long vision, keep your head up to make sure that you swift the play to the right, to the left. But even though you gotta adapt to that, we have very, very close situations or tight situations in football that futsal skills help a lot. If you think about how the low blocks are now defending their own goal area, you see that it's almost like you're playing futsal inside the 16-yard box. We have a lot of these short wall passes, short tricks, very good finishing under pressure, and futsal brings you or gives the player that possibility to develop that. When it comes to Brazil and what has changed when it comes to futsal helping players to develop their skills is the fact that now with 16 years old, the player has to be already signing a professional contract. In the past, we didn't have that sort of trigger. We didn't have that sort of boundary where players could still playing, and then around 18, 19, they sign a professional contract. Now they sign at 16. Otherwise, they can go free, and the club loses its talent. So what happened is, because they gotta be signing a contract 16, they shall somehow they shall move to the, or perhaps to specialize in the outdoor field much quicker than they used to have in the past. So in the past, we used to say that between 14 and 16, the players should move to play only football. Now, because the 16, they are already playing professional. So you got to bring it down to perhaps 12 to make sure that, okay, from now on 12, you're not on futsal anymore. Make sure that you stick with football, because in 2 or 3 years' time, you got to be playing professional. So because they brought this line down, somehow it brought down also the age in the level, or the level age where the player has to perhaps to specialize more in the outdoor court. But by having said that, I still believe that futsal can help a lot. The youth develop. They should encourage players to play futsal as much as they can. But it coming to a point that they will have to make their choice. And you have now in the preparation of professional football teams, they use a small-sided game every single time to make sure that they develop that sort of close skills, ball control, tight situations, and it comes back now to methodology as well.
Okay, coach, thank you. Appreciate that. Let's go to our next topic. Yeah, Brazilian League and other top leagues. You have a lot of experience inside and outside of Brazil, all over the world. With your background, how do you see today our Brazilian league, so-called Brasileirão? How do you see today our league in terms of competitiveness, in terms of, how attractive it is, how people in Europe or in Asia, how people see our Brazilian league as a product? And do you, if you compare 10 years ago, or if you compare with other leagues, maybe Portugal league, how do you see the direction that our Brazilian league is going? It's a positive direction, it's a negative direction. What's your opinion about it, please?
Igor, we have pros and cons. Let's go to talk about we have to separate two important points here, or perhaps two different approaches. One is when it comes to the league, the championship as a product. The other as the championship as the level of competitiveness. Let's talk about the second one. I believe that when it comes to competitiveness, it's very hard to play the Brazilian championship. When you think about Europe, you might think about France, Ligue 1, for example, in France. You have always PSG winning, and you have now Rennes that's trying to challenge the title. When you think about Portugal, you have 2 or 3 teams, Sporting, Benfica, and Porto. When you go to Germany, you see that Bayern is always winning. Once in a while, you have Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund. We go to Spain, Real Madrid and Barca. Now you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have Real Sociedad that won Copa del Rey. You go to Italy, you have the Juventus, Milan, Internazionale, and Napoli. You go to Premier League, And then you have Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea. They always are on this four. In Brazil, you start the competition with at least 8 to 10 teams that be able to challenge or perhaps to challenge for the title, right? And this is something that's going a different direction for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's something that's dangerous for us because for the last 2 or 3 years, Flamengo and Palmeiras have been dominating the scenario, and it's not good. We don't want to have in Brazil what they have in Spain, always Barca and Real Madrid. Here we have Fluminense, you have Flamengo, we have Botafogo, we have Vasco, Grêmio Internacional, Cruzeiro, Atlético, Palmeiras, Santos, São Paulo, Corinthians, Bahia. All of these teams, when we start the competition, all of them, they are quite prepared to be in the top 4, top 6. And perhaps 8 of them, they will be able to fight for the title till the end. And because Palmeiras and Flamengo now, they're creating such a solid financial support, they are basically dominating the scenario for the last 2 years. And this also have been implicating into the Libertadores Cup as well. I think the last 4 Libertadores Cup where Brazilian teams won the last 4 Libertadores Cup. We have Fluminense, Flamengo, Fluminense, Palmeiras that have been winning back straight for the back to perhaps from 2022. Now we have 2019 Flamengo with Jorge Jesus, and I think 2020 was River Plate with Marcelo Gallardo that played against Boca Juniors, and they played in Spain that game because of the pandemic scenario. And then from the 21 onwards, always Brazilian team, and that's not good for the South America competition either. So when it comes to that competitiveness within the Brazilian Championship, we got to remember that it's very hard to play Brazilian competition because we're talking a huge country. The calendar is very heavy. You play a game every 3 days. You travel a lot, different regions. It's hard for you to go to Fortaleza and play against Fortaleza or Ceará up there and then come down to play in Porto Alegre against Grêmio and International, or go to Goiás and play Goiás, or go to Chapecó and play Chapecoense. Sometimes the logistic for traveling is very hard. It's very hard to recover players to keep that intensity all the time. Like when you think about England, Premier League, the logistic is not that difficult. So they are able to keep up the intensity of the game through the whole competition very high. In Brazil, if you want to play high pressure all the time, it's quite difficult because you're not going to recover from one game to another because you got to travel a lot. Sometimes you play on Sunday, you recover Monday, on Tuesday you are already traveling to play on Wednesday. So in the meantime, you just try to recover players. That's one of the difficulties we have. By saying that, I'm also not, I cannot take, I also gotta make sure that we don't give up trying to do, apart from the fact that we have a lot of difficulties. We gotta keep fighting to keep that intensity. You gotta keep fighting to make sure that the competition is at the highest standard as possible. That's the competition side of things. When it comes to the product, we have a long way to go. We're now taking steps to turn our referees into professional ones. That's very important. It's a very important step because refereeing has been a weak spot in our product. But now that we are making them professionals, we believe that the situation will turn around. The venues themselves, they have improved. The pitch, they are now have FIFA standards when it comes to size and quality of the pitch as well. We still have problems when it comes to confrontations with supporters. Is something that's not good for the game. Riots, they are not good on telly, not good anywhere. Also, when it comes to how our players approach referees in the game, putting pressure on the referees all the time, this is something that's an image that's not good for the sport. So it's not good for the product as well. So this is the product side of things that I believe that we still have a long way to go. And we are struggling now to deal with some kind of game manipulation bets. This is something that we are fighting against as well, and it damaged the image of the sport. So when it comes to the image of the product, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, when you said about the referee and the players, the approach they have with each other, it blows my mind what the culture that I don't know why, but at some point I don't know, this culture was created in Brazil that players all the time are, challenging the referee, trying to intimidate the referee, and then you have, the emotional part comes in and get even bigger. And I used to live in Ireland and UK, England, and I used to see on TV rugby games. And rugby games, the guys are giants. It's a big guys, strong guys, and they don't have this kind of approach with the referee. And here in the United States, when I see American football, the guys are big guys, and we don't see this kind of approach with the referee. I don't know why, but this culture was created in soccer, especially in Brazil. Every game you will have problems. And this is, I think, as a product is very bad and ugly for the league.
I agree with you. I remember once I was in Australia, I went to a pub there, I think it was in Canberra, and we had some rugby guys there having a beer because they're big and they drink a lot as well. And it's kind of intimidating because the guy they are really huge. I can't remember, I can't forget the name of the guy that played for Canberra Raiders. His name was Mau Meninga. He was a door, a walking door. And it's quite funny you mentioned that even though they are that big and they respect the referees' decisions in the game, and it also make the game much more attractive to everyone who is watching. Last week, we had the first leg of the semifinal of the UEFA Champions League, PSG 5 and Bayern 4. It was a fantastic game. And I think it was more than 65% of the game, the ball was on the game, not stopped over. And at that same day, at night of the same day, I was watching a South American game here between Cruzeiro and Boca Juniors for this Libertadores Cup. And was when it comes to that point of the situation regarding to how many times the game was stopped during that particular match was incredible. It was less than 50% of ball in the game, in playing game. So that's really bad because you lose interests. And a long time, that nowadays kids, they have so many things that they can turn their attention to. And if the game are not interesting to them, they go to do something else. And not only the kids, nobody wants to be sitting in front of TV or even in a stadium. You move, you pay a ticket and you go there. You have less than 50% of the playing time with the ball in real playing time. And it comes back also to strengthen the rules when it comes to jurisdiction. There is a strategy here in Brazil that I never agree with that. It's called efeito suspensivo. The guy somehow, the player somehow, they do something bad, and he got or she got sent off, and then they appeal on court, and if he or she was to be out for 3 or 4 games, and they appeal, and the next game she or he is allowed to play while they are thinking on how to judge her or his case. So if you're not strict to the rules and you have that kind of flexibility, you give room for that kind of attitude in the game. So challenging the referee is something that's very, very bad. And I tell you, I have no patience for that anymore. I love watching, for instance, for example, French football, Ligue 1. I think Ligue 1 has a kind of game that's close to what we used to have in the past, where a lot of flamboyance, a lot of game flow, a lot of malevolence, as you say here in Brazil. And then we go to watch here, and first foul, you have 3, 4 players within or challenge the referee. Sometimes I gotta say to you, sometimes I just turn the television off and say, I don't want, I can't cope with that any longer. And this is really bad for the game.
Yeah, that's terrible, and hopefully someone do something, CBF or FIFA, I don't know, to improve that for sure. Okay, coach.
And it's not only Brazil; it's South America in general.
Yeah,
it's not particular for the Brazilian Championship. When you go to watch the South America Cup or the Libertadores Cup, you have the same sort of problem. It's something that unfortunately is endemic in South America.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I agree with that. Coach, I would like to talk now about CBF Academy. Besides your work as soccer coach, the manager, head coach, all these things, CBF Academy, CBF, in terms of, the coaches, né? CBF now has CBF Academy, and you are a CBF Academy instructor. You are part of the officials that help to produce better and new coaches in Brazil. So I would like to ask, how do you see this moment? Because of your background, you saw those days that there was nothing in terms of like the CBF Academy or something like this from CBF, and now you are part of something that it's getting every year is getting even bigger, and the relationship in terms of the professionals involved in the game in Brazil and South America. You have professional people coming from Portugal. And how do you see this moment as a CBF instructor, official instructor, and CBF Academy in general? How do you see these moments in Brazil?
Igor, we got together in 2024. We were talking about this a couple of minutes ago when you're doing your e-license, I believe, right? E-license. I've been involved in the development of the football coaching course since 2010. It still wasn't CBF Academy. I remember the first group we didn't have any former players, but only academic that were trying to make a career within professional football. But then 2 years later, we start receiving those former players. And that's when I told myself, now that course will grow, because when you start receiving the acknowledgement of the old players, because until that point, they were the ones who every single director used to seek for a coaching position. And until that point, they didn't see any benefit of taking part of a coaching course. When they saw that the coaching course was delivering quality instructions and preparing quality coaches, they started to come in. And from that point onwards, the course, they improved a lot. In 2016, CBF took over. Now the courses are under the umbrella of CBF, and the CBF created the CBF Academy. Now our license, they are acknowledged by CONMEBOL. They are also acknowledged in Asia, in Oceania, in Europe. In Europe, of course, you got besides the license, you got to prove career background on the pitch to be able to be accepted there. You got to have at least, I believe, 10 years of coaching as the first Serie A in Brazil to be able, with the license, to be able to coach there. So it has improved a lot. We've been receiving coaches from all over the globe, from US, from Canada, from Europe, from Portugal, from South America, from Asia, from Middle East. We also receiving instructors from Europe, from Portugal, from Spain, from Scotland, from Italian. I remember myself when I was doing my pro license in 2017, I got to know Isabel Mesquita, who is a coach. She is an instructor and coach in Portugal. Achilio Zorbe, that came from Italy. So this kind of exchange with different backgrounds and different schools, it's great for the development of the coaches. I myself, as an instructor, I benefit a lot from sharing time with you guys over there. You've been there, you know how the environment, how rich is the environment, how it's kind of special to communicate and to share knowledge and to share experience in such a so many people with different background. It's so rich. And when you have the opportunity to express yourself, but above all, when you have the opportunity to listen to what people want to say, helps a lot to improve. So I believe that the course now are in a position to go even stronger. CBF Academy has been also developing different, not only coaching football, but also all the subjects or all other careers that support or take part in the football ecosystem, like physiotherapists, like how do you say, like executive managers. So the CBF Academy has developed a lot. And when it comes to the specificity of football coaching courses, I myself had the opportunity through CBF Academy to be in the Caribbean islands, in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, also delivering football coaching course. And it comes from the fact that I was within the CBF Academy. So it has been quite a journey, still a long way to go. We have been able to keep up the pace and make sure that all coaches in the Brazilian Championship, they are now have the A license. That's very important. They are not accepted to coach a team within the Brazilian Championship if you don't have an A license, or even more important, a pro license. The Libertadores Cup, if you don't have a pro license, you can take Fluminense, for instance, within the Libertadores Cup or South America Cup, if you don't have a pro license, a CBF pro license. So it has been quite a quite journey and a fulfilled, like we've been achieving the goals that we need to achieve to develop the course and to put CBF Academy where it stands right now.
All right, thank you, Coach. Yeah, I could see when I was there. You know, it's a process, but the most important, in my opinion, it's a process going the right direction. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So that's the main point. You know. go in the right direction with organization, credibility, concept, ideas that meet the Brazilian reality, the Brazilian needs, and so the Brazilian philosophy, the Brazilian culture, and then you go to the right direction. I think it's just question of time, couple more years, it's gonna be even better and better and better. Just as you said, keep up the good job.
Yeah, it's important that it meets the standard of all coaching courses around the globe in such a way that our coaches, when they leave the CBF Academy course, they are acceptable in other ecosystem, all the football ecosystems around the globe. That's very important. People like yourself that's now working in USA, people that wants to work in, there is an important point in the globe now that's seeking a lot of Brazilian coaches, that's Middle East, Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Middle East. So it's important also that not only we strengthen our philosophy, our culture, but also that we meet the standards to be able to make sure that our coaches are accepted all over the globe as well.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Thank you so much. No, just to wrap up, we are more than 1 hour in our conversation. Just to wrap up, real quick, I would like to listen to you. The World Cup is around the corner. Brazil is Brazil. And how do you see, what's your opinion? Do you think we are in a very close, or we are in a very strong position to maybe make the finals, or you don't feel like that? What is your feeling for this World Cup? How do you see that, based on, of course, your experience? How do you see the Brazilian national team playing this World Cup, please?
I've been evaluating the teams or the squads that will take part in the World Cup, and I would split them into 3 to 4 groups. My first pick, or like the strongest one for me at the moment, I can point 3 national teams: Spain, France, and Argentina. I believe that they are the 3 strongest squads at the moment. I believe that France is amazing. The squad is so many options, a lot of depth. I think when you talk about a group of players and such depth, I think France is in a very, very good position. Spain has very good quality in terms of playing, in playing model. Spanish game model is very smooth. I don't think they have such depth like the French team has. The French team and Argentina has also an amazing team. I think this top 3 for me. And then we come with a second group that, in terms of stage of evolution, I'll point out 2. That's Portugal and England. That's playing quite good game. The coach basically don't have any doubts about who should be in or out. And then we have a third group where we have Brazil, for me, Brazil, Germany, and Netherlands. I would put those other 3 teams in that third position. And then we can keep going, but I will stick with these 3 groups here that I believe you might perhaps have an underdog coming here or there, like Morocco, and perhaps someone from Asia, but Morocco would be in a position perhaps to bring some discomfort to some teams. But I believe that this 3 to 5, 8 teams I mentioned to you, you might put another 2 over there. They will be able, Switzerland as well, that has been very competitive in the last couple of World Cups. But I think the champion will come out of these 8 clubs there. And when it comes to Brazil, you got to remember something that's very important. We are struggling at the moment. We did struggle to to somehow to qualify. We still don't have all the positions closed within our squad. We won't be able to say what would be the lineup for the first game in Brazil in the World Cup. We still don't have this. But if you have a look back in 1994, when we won in USA, we qualified. Basically, we had to bring Romario to beat Bolivia in Maracanã when he scored 2 goals to go through to the USA World Cup in 1994. We ended up winning the World Cup. And in 2002 with Filipão, when Filipão took over, the team was out of shape. He lost a game to Honduras. I don't know whether you remember that. He lost a game 2-0 to Honduras in the Central America there. And he ended up winning the World Cup against Germany in 2000, playing the final against Germany in 2002. So whenever we were favorites in the World Cup, we end up not winning. And I hope that the history repeats itself now. And I believe that we can make the semifinals. I can place Brazil into the semifinals. From that onwards, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I used to work with a guy. He always told me, Igor, I like when you go for a competition and nobody thinks that you have a chance. You know, I don't like I don't like when Brazil goes to a World Cup like the biggest favorite, like 2006, if I don't make a mistake. 2006, if you look the Brazilian national team, everybody was telling, wow, the team is amazing, is awesome, is a machine, is gonna, you know, as you said, 94, 2002, a lot of questions, maybe this, maybe that, I'm not sure, and then boom, championship. So, you know, maybe it's, you know, maybe it's a good way to start the championship like this, you know, with your experience, your achievements, your titles, your career. Do you think that is a good idea when you start the championship or you start the competition not so confident, and then during the competition you start to grow your performance and confidence? You know what I mean? Well, how do you see that? Do you think that's the best way to go?
Well, when you have a look at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, I remember watching Argentina play in Saudi Arabia and lost in 2-1 to Saudi Arabia. I turned to my wife and my son and I said, depending upon how the coach approached that loss, it might end up being really good for them. And I think Lionel Scaloni, the Argentinian coach, he was very competent and very, his feeling was spot on to turn the things around. World Cup is a very short competition. If you think back into 1994, we had a player that was high, was after Romario, perhaps he would have been the top player in the team. And after 2 games that he didn't play well, Barreira didn't wait too long to change him, to sack him from the team and bring Mazinho in. Filipão in 2002, we had Juninho Paulista, who was a starter, who had been at that point a starter in every single game. And he played the 1 or 2 games that he didn't play well. Filipão didn't take long time to swap him and play Kleberson. So it's a short competition. If you are not clinical to make the adjustments you have to make, you lose the opportunity. And I think Scaloni did exactly that. He changed the systems of the playing system. He changed a couple of players, and Argentina just took off. And that sort of struggle strengthened them to fight for the title. Having said that, I would like to say to you that there are three national teams in the globe that you can never rule them out of the challenge for the title. That's Brazil, Argentina, and Germany. They are the top three teams that basically been in every single World Cup. I think France is getting there as well, but I think these three teams, you never can rule them out of the competition in such a way that you can say they are not going to make it, because they might come up with the good at the end of the day. And I think that if you start not performing well, you can still be able to make the top if you are clinical to make the adjustments straight away. Because if you take a little bit too long, and I think this happened with Brazil in 2018 and 2022, take a little bit too long to make the adjustments. The competition doesn't give you time to do that, and then you got to knockout phase and you are not smooth enough, you are out of the competition. That's what I think.
Okay, Coach, thank you so much. Thank you for share your knowledge, your information, your opinions, your thoughts. Share your experience here. I really appreciate the opportunity to listen to you, and it's very nice. It's always learning. I think we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And to try to learn and pay attention to people with more experience and listen to them. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. I would like just to point one thing about the USA. I think Pochettino, he lost a game 5-1 for Belgium, right? 5-2. I think it was 5-2.
Yeah.
And I think that he's a good coach as well. I remember him coaching Tottenham. And I believe that he might have been able to take very good lessons from that particular game. And if you make the right adjustments, by including the fact that you're playing at home, perhaps you can bring USA with Morocco in that composition to make sure that perhaps that would be another team that somehow can be in that top 10 that I mentioned before. Thank you so much for the invitation. Lovely talking to you. Nice to see you again. Wish you all the best and all success over there. And whenever you need some kind of chat like this, I'm always available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Coach. Thanks so much. Okay. Have a good day. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.